we are talking about the role of instructional materials. So when we talk about the use of instructional materials for language curriculum design, we need to know the relationship or the roles of course books, teachers, learners for designing instructional materials or developing instructional materials. Well, language curriculum design, as we have already discussed in our previous modules, is a systematic process which involves various stakeholders. And in this regard, while making decisions about, deciding the roles or the relationship between the course book learners and teacher, we need to know what are factors involved and how we can better understand these things. So the reason why we are talking this little topic here is just to understand the relationship that exists and how this relationship can better be understood. Right. What's the role of course books for language curriculum design? As discussed earlier, course books or textbooks, they form an essential component of language curriculum design, right? But there are some conflicting arguments, opposing arguments about the role of textbooks. Prabhu, for example, a big name in second language acquisition, an Indian guy who has done remarkable work on task-based language teaching, and who is very well known about his for his views about task-based language teaching. So Prabhu believes that teacher and learner, teaching involves knowing about the learners. If your teaching doesn't, for example, meet the needs or match the needs of the learners, then it might be a useless exercise. So the reason why course books are seen ineffective source of information or input by Prabhu is that they actually rule the learners out of the process. They are not brought into the process, and they are not asked about their needs, about their wants, strengths, or weaknesses. And all right, much the similar way like Prabhu argues, the textbooks, why they are not, considered to be necessarily, bringing in some fruitful input in the classroom, is that they tend to remove the learners from the negotiation process. So I could give you example in this regard. For example, in our state-run schools in the Pakistani context, textbooks are there which are published, for example, by provincial ministries. So these textbooks were not prepared, while involving learners, and their they were not directly asked. Rather, it was assumed that learners need certain types of knowledge. So that's the reason that we need to be cautious about making decisions about the relationship between course book, teacher, and learners. So, the contention implied here in this discussion, brief discussion, is while making decisions about the understanding of roles of course book learners and teachers, we need to employ a systematic and a flexible approach which accepts all types of stakeholders. Dividing the parts of process, the course book, we need to be aware whether the content and sequencing has its logical progress. What type of language is required for a course book and how much is going to be covered. So we need to know, and we need to tell and format and presentation, which format the lessons will be presented, and who is going to present the lessons. Well, the teachers, and what type of knowledge they need to present those lessons. So monitoring and assessment, so what type of assessment is required. So these content, format, and monitoring, three elements indicate that textbooks shouldn't be seen as a sole entity. Rather, teachers and learners, they are very much they are integral part of this process. And this is how content and sequencing, format and presentation, monitoring and assessment, so they are important elements, and we need to be aware of the role between teachers, textbooks, and the learners.